it's not been grassed or strawed or something like that to prevent erosion. Another requirement of Knox County is that it has to have regulations in place that control other construction-related waste. This is a pile of debris. This is not in Knox County. This is actually a post-Katrina recovery. But it kind of tells the story of what we're looking at. Trash, debris, construction-related waste that should be kept on site and disposed of properly. These regulations must be implemented for sites that are 1 acre or greater. These are development or redevelopment sites. And there must be higher standards for development or redevelopment sites that discharge to impaired waters or high-quality waters. To my knowledge, there's probably not any high-quality waters here in Knox County, but again, we have plenty of streams that are on that impaired list. A takeaway that I want you to get from this piece, the during construction requirements that TDEC has put out for Knox County and other Phase 2 communities have a very strong link to the state's construction site management program. The Tennessee Construction General Permit, you see the little acronym here, embodies the state's program. Those embody the regulations that developers have to adhere to and site contractors have to adhere to at the state's level. And some very specific pieces of that state program have been placed in the county's NPDES permit, have been placed in the county's TMDL requirements, and so therefore you need to know there is that strong link. No one has ever come out and said you must do the construction general permit, but they certainly have implied that that'd be a nice way to go, and there are some very, very specific requirements that come out of the state program there. Okay, moving on from during construction requirements to after construction or post-construction. Specifically, the state is requiring the county to, require water quality controls after construction. Now, this is a big change. This is something that across the nation we haven't really done in the past for new developments and redevelopments to consider water quality once the development is complete. So you have to either prevent or treat water quality after development is complete, once you have the building and the pavement and everything on the ground and working. These requirements are implemented for developments 1 acre or greater. Again, this is the state level program. The state says that you must have structural and non-structural strategies. I'm going to show some pictures of those later, but let me very quickly explain what those are. Structural controls are engineered facilities that are designed to remove pollutants from stormwater. So this would be something like an extended detention pond or an engineered wetland or an engineered ditch or swale, something that is specifically constructed and designed to remove pollutants from stormwater. Non-structural strategies, in contrast, are site design practices that are intended to reduce the amount of stormwater that's running off of a site or to prevent pollutants from entering stormwater at all. These are things like not cutting down all the trees on your development site before you develop, maintaining some open space so that stormwater that hits the ground can soak into it, or if it is running off, it's not carrying pollutants with it. Other things can be reducing the amount of impervious area on a site. Therefore, you have less buildings, you have less pavement, you have less driveways, parking lots, whatever, and therefore less stormwater runoff to treat and control. The last piece of this requiring water quality controls is that the county must ensure the long-term maintenance and operation of these controls. This is another very different piece, a change from what the county and the city have done in the past. Excuse me, not the city, the county, what they have done in the past. This basically says whatever structural and non-structural control strategies are implemented, whether at the regional level or at the site development level, the county has to have some mechanism in place that allows them to tell TDEC these controls are maintained and are operating in the fashion that they're supposed to. They are treating water quality or preventing stormwater runoff from occurring, things like that. So that's a key piece that I'll come back to. Finally, requirements from the state. We have to have a water quality buffer regulation in place. A buffer is simply a vegetated strip of land around a stream, a pond, a lake, or a wetland that allows infiltration, allows filtration, allows cooling of stormwater runoff. I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. Just understand that that's a requirement of the state regulations. Okay, so what are the impacts of these two regulations, Phase 2 and TMDLs? Well, first of all, there's necessary ordinance improvements. They say, specifically the Phase 2 rule says, you have got to have a regulatory mechanism for erosion and sediment control, for post-construction water quality control, for pollutant discharges and dumping, and oh, by the way, you have to ensure the long-term operation and maintenance of these facilities. Other impacts are that fall out of that. Now you have improved ordinance regulations. You should probably improve or add new processes to support those regulations. Development plans, review, submittal, checklists. What are you going to do about construction inspection enforcement? How are you going to maintain the long-term operation and maintenance of these stormwater facilities? What we're talking about tonight are not the programmatic pieces or the process pieces. What we're talking about tonight are the necessary ordinance improvements to comply with these regulations. So let's turn to the development of the ordinance. You have in your hands a timeline. And if I could hold this up. A timeline that looks like this. This timeline, and it's hard probably for people to see on the wall up there, what you have is a timeline. It's got several boxes in blue, a couple in gray, and one in orange. What I'm attempting to show you here is what kind of activities have been going on at about the time of this ordinance development process or ordinance adoption process. There's been a lot of confusion about what's linked to what and who did what and what's been happening, so I'm going to try and clear that up pretty briefly here. This timeline in the blue shows the activities that were undertaken to develop the new ordinance and manual and get it out to the public. It also shows some activities in the gray that have had an impact on the development of the ordinance. They're not directly related, but they've had an impact in some way. And then I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of this about the stormwater advisory process and clear up some confusion about that. Okay, there has been a public process with regards to developing this ordinance. That started with a Knox County Site Planning Roundtable back in the middle of 2002. It's the very top line on your timeline. One thing I would like you to notice about this is that the Phase 2 regulation did not start until March of 2003. That's when the county staff put together the county's application for the Phase 2 permit, and they began compliance in June. But way back in 2001, the county knew that the Phase 2 regulation was coming, and it had this post-construction piece to it that was so new to everybody. It was new to staff, it was new to commission, it was new to developers, it was new to engineers and folks in town. They knew that that would be a huge process, a huge undertaking, and they wanted to do it right. And so even before the Phase 2 regulation was in place, county staff were planning ahead and started the site planning roundtable process. The process was specifically geared towards looking at the post-construction compliance with NPDES Phase 2. That was the whole purpose of it. Some funding from TVA is what kicked it off. We had up to 80 participants over 3 years. The objective of that process very clearly was to build a framework for the regulations and policies for the county's water quality program. It was not to implement this entire ordinance. It was specifically to put the regulations together, pieces of this ordinance that pertain to water quality. It is limited to post-construction. There was one non-negotiable rule for that group. The Site Planning Roundtable had to, whatever they recommended, whatever they felt what we should put in place, that the county should put in place, had to comply with the NPDES Phase 2 permit. So the option of we don't want to do water quality buffers, therefore we're going to opt out, was not there. They had to, at a minimum, comply with those requirements. This is a list of the Site Planning Roundtable participants, and as I said, it was up to 80 people. We never had that many people at one time. Over the course of the years that it was implemented, a number of people heard about it, got interested, and whoever wanted to be included was included. They were allowed to come to the meetings. This is a list of, it's a good cross-section of the community. We have developers on this list. We have engineers, site planning engineers. We've got environmental activists on this list. We've got county staff. We've got the fire marshal's office. You might ask, why would